Um, User experience, I mean, it doesn't secure, generally speaking. Pen testing helps you find the gaps that could be exploited, that I guess could impact the user's sort of thoughts of the product. If somebody's data gets stolen, it's not a good look for a product. Say for instance, we found a SQL injection vulnerability and we were able to extract data from that. The overall kind of perception and kind of experience of that product wouldn't be great. Also wouldn't be great for the company whose application it is, so to speak. So I guess pen testing in general is a great tool for making sure that users have a seamless experience in terms of their data security. So ensuring that whilst they're using applications that are highly available, accessible across the internet, although they are putting highly sensitive data in there, personally identifiable data, the crown jewels, it's kept safe, and that people's perception of that product is obviously better at that point. Okay, that's quite an interesting question, is that? I guess the most important components are understanding the product, or the most important component is understanding the product, whilst active testing is, extremely important. If you don't understand the fundamentals of a product, it's very difficult to advise on the security of it. So, say for instance, you don't understand the context that the application's used in, or you don't understand the use cases of the application, or where it's deployed, or how it's used, it's very difficult to advise people. It's okay to advise on, your traditional vulnerabilities, your SQL injection, your cross-site scripting, your command injection, but when it comes to kind of the real vulnerabilities, the things that people miss, the key thing is understanding the threat landscape that you're assessing. I guess in terms of stages, there are obviously a few things to further understand from there. So you want to understand, the target audience of the application, the placement of the application, how it's intended to be used, and then you can go ahead and abuse that. I think from a technical perspective, there's quite a lot of important phases. I think everything's important in terms of web applications, not just considering the code as kind of the entry point, but considering everything that hooks into that and sits around that. So, the server that sits underneath it, the code that sits on the server, the users that interact with the application, the cloud systems that integrate into the application, how all of those marry up. Because when you don't understand that threat landscape as both the tester and the product owner, it becomes incredibly difficult to secure, your product or what you have that needs to be assessed. From a technical perspective, there's quite a lot of important phases dependent on the application. Obviously ensuring that users have appropriate authentication and authorization mechanisms, ensuring that, the end user's input is thoroughly untrusted. There's a lot of things that do play into it, but I think the key thing when it comes to application security is understanding the concept, understanding what you're testing, because if you don't, it's very difficult to understand the vulnerabilities that are associated with it. I think in terms of assessing products from, I guess, several different perspectives is important. Understanding your user base and understanding where those interfaces are, probably one of the most imperative things when it comes to web security or, app security in general. So ensuring that the medium that the application's accessed via is secure is a massive part of it when we're talking about three-tiered desktop applications, thick clients, mobile applications. The controls might differ between the different platforms. So it's imperative that we assess things from several different perspectives, understanding how users or attackers might see these and might interact with these applications, because say for instance there's another API call in a mobile application that's not used in the web application. It introduces another risk where there's interfaces that haven't been assessed, which leaves you open to, I guess, a lot of different attacks, in a sense that if they've not been assessed, you're not aware of the threats that could be associated with those specific avenues. So it's important that you consider all interfaces of the application, whether that be via a mobile application or whether that be via a desktop, whether that be via a browser, as kind of different interfaces and hash it out from there. It's important to make sure the whole threat landscape is covered, not just a particular entry point that's most used, because generally speaking, that's not the one that's going to be attacked. So there's several frameworks and tools that are extremely useful for web application testing. I mean, the Swiss Army knife of web app testing is Burp Suite. We all use it day in, day out. It's, you know, the thing that powers us to effectively test applications. Obviously, whilst we're assessing applications, we're constantly benchmarking the results of the testing against standards such as OWASP. And that's probably the most famous one that comes to mind. It provides people with kind of a set of controls or a set of pitfalls to help effectively design an application. Obviously, we then use that to plan out our testing and facilitate that through tools such as Burp Suite to ensure that kind of the whole threat landscape is considered. That helps us test anything HTTP based, from mobile applications to web applications to APIs to desktops. Generally speaking, the tools and the frameworks that you use for one are used for everything else. So in terms of frameworks, OWASP Top 10 is definitely, or the OWASP framework is definitely up there in terms of what you want to use as a benchmark for ensuring kind of a baseline of security. Obviously, that's no substitute for, you know, a little bit of common sense and understanding what your threat landscape is. So understanding who's accessing your application, you know, the intended audience of the application, kind of the understanding that they have of the security that you're providing. Because ultimately, you know, you can plan all of the functionality out and understand all of these threats before they arise. Which aids in pen testing significantly, because at that point makes our jobs significantly easier to help pick out you know, the more severe things rather than the low-hanging fruit that are usually picked out by scanners and such. Yeah, so there's a number of benefits of automated web application testing, but I think the key thing is to understand what role it plays in kind of the continual security sort of monitoring of an application. Generally speaking, assessing an application from kind of an automated standpoint is a really bad idea. Scanners generally lack any form of context, which is what a lot of application testing is built upon. But automated testing does play its part in a certain sense, that it helps you identify a lot of low-hanging fruit that, you know, would typically waste a lot of time, a lot of pen testing time, you know, collecting, reporting on, so on and so forth. It then allows the pen testers to kind of focus on the more severe things. I think a really good example of that would be kind of like an insecure direct object reference vulnerability, where the context of the web app needs to be considered to even identify the vulnerability. So say, for instance, there's an ID field on a password reset function. That ID field can be manipulated to reset the passwords of another user. It's very unlikely that an automated scanner would have that context to be able to spot something like that, but to a tester, that would be a really easy thing to spot. So whilst automated web app scanning is, you know, a tool to help make sure that you are kind of continually secured from sort of low-hanging fruit and, you know, contextless vulnerabilities, you do still need to weave pen testing in there. It's a little bit of a balance. I think in terms of using it as a catch-all, it's not a great idea. It should be used in balance with pen testing, in balance with other kind of security solutions, reviewing your code to ensure kind of all-round security. But generally speaking, just scanning a web application is not enough anymore, just due to the nature of kind of the modern landscape of vulnerabilities being a little bit more context-based. While we're all up there in terms of understanding the logic issues, which scanners can find appropriately, business logic issues and, you know, context-based vulnerabilities are just not possible to find with web application scanners. I think in more recent years, as we were sort of saying previously, vulnerabilities have transformed from less traditional sort of traditional vulnerabilities, you know, such as your SQL injections and your cross-site scripting, because thanks to kind of frameworks in general, you know, kind of development frameworks, and the more shifting towards things that are context-based and you know, adjoining systems. One thing to consider as a professional and as somebody that is looking to secure an application is making sure that you fully understand the scope of the assessment that you're undertaking, not artificially restricting the assessment scope. So, you know, where an application hooks into a back-end cloud system or utilising a back-end cloud system, kind of ensuring that that cloud system is also secure as well as the code, because it's likely that an attacker that doesn't have the scope restrictions that a Pentester has kind of use that sort of blurring in lines between the two sort of technologies for their own game, whereas Pentesters, we'd be kind of typically restricted to the code itself and the application itself. Kind of real life attackers are not going to be restricted in that sense. You know, they're going to be targeting cloud systems, they're going to be targeting underlying APIs, they're going to be targeting, you know, the application itself. So it's important to consider the whole solution rather than applications, because the more and more kind of we move into the future, applications are becoming more complex. They're hooking into other systems, you know, they're hooking into AI-based systems, they're hooking into cloud-based systems, they're hooking into, you know, you name it. It's also ensuring that that's done in a safe manner. It's really important as a security professional to understand that the ways in which those things are done and the bounds of responsibility between those systems. So understanding where the client's data is being passed, how those external systems are being considered to ensure that things are sort of secured appropriately. I think one mind that comes to example are like open cloud buckets that sit behind mobile applications. While they've been there for a number of years, it's crazy the amount of people that forget to secure, you know, S3 buckets that support Android applications or iOS applications. You've got to consider the whole threat landscape. It's not just considering the application's code anymore, it's considering the bigger picture. And that was a video about web application security. I hope that's been interesting.